Good, Matt. How are you?
Doing well. Okay.
Eric? Gail just came in.
Hi, Gail.
Hi, guys. Sorry.
That's okay.
No problem. We're just recording attendance.
Gary?
Hi, Mr. Fedorcha.
Jean? James? Jen Butts? Jill? You? Michelle Dada, Shelley Dada? Michelle Martineau?
Hi, Mrs. Martineau.
Bob?
Hello, Matt. Good to see you, or hear you.
Yes, thank you.
Bob? Scott? Sherry? Stephen? Haas? And Tim.
Hi, Steve and Tim.
Hello.
Okay, I will go back and correct spelling errors there, but I think I got everyone.
Yep, we're ready to go on our end. We are unmuted and everything's streaming on YouTube. So we're ready to begin whenever you guys are ready.
All right, Madam Chairperson, we are all set to start.
Mrs. Husak, I think you have to unmute yourself.
That would help, wouldn't it?
Yep.
Sounds good.
All right, thank you very much. All right, hello everybody and welcome to the Education Policy Committee meeting for June. We have several agenda items this evening. We'll start under our education section and then we'll roll into our policy section afterwards. The first item that we have on here for tonight is the Future Ready PA Index for 1920. And I'm going to click on that so you can take a peek at what that's going to look like. So obviously under COVID-19, because of the pandemic and the school closings, we've had several pieces of data that we typically collect within a school year that we are unable to collect this year because they didn't happen. Things like the Keystone exams, the PSSAs, the PASA. Without having those exams, that also means that we don't have our growth data from PVAS. There were no NIMS or NOCDs given because students did not complete the year in person at LCTI. So there are very many pieces of data that we won't have for this year. So this is essentially a document that was released by Pennsylvania Department of Education to say what we will have and how our PA Future Ready Index look for this coming school year, for the end of this year. So they are continuing to collect college and career evidence, but they're not going to report that out as far as the Future Ready PA Index is concerned. So some of the things that they do collect that they may not have been able to get this year, but they were because they're lagging indicators, are those at the bottom of that first page. So regular attendance is customary, a one-year lagging indicator, so it's actually from 18-19 school year. So even though we stopped reporting attendance, the state has asked us to stop as of that March 13th. We continue to take attendance, obviously, in our COE. And as far as the reporting, it's a lagging indicator for 1 year. So that'll be the 18-19 data. The graduation rate also is a lagging indicator. That'll be from 18-19. the English language proficiency score. In Pennsylvania, we were lucky because we had all of our students take the WIDA assessment. All of the results were submitted, and Pennsylvania just got to scoring those right before the shutdown. So they do have WIDA results, and actually we've created a letter and we've downloaded the results, and we're actually sending those out to families this week. So families will be getting that information probably at the end of this week. But nonetheless, there is going to be 1920 data for that category. The next one is post-secondary transition to school, military, and work. This is, again, another lagging indicator. This one actually lags 16 months. So this will be 17-18 data that will be put into the Future Ready PA Index. So then the second page of this just goes through every single indicator that gets reported, whether there'll be new data or no change from the previous year's data, and then when that data is actually from. So what school year's data is going to be in that. So this is how our Future Ready PA Index will populate this year. Any questions on that? Okay, and then we expect again that would be released probably in the fall because we don't have testing data in there. It may be a little bit earlier, but we're expecting, to see that as we return to school, as we do our normal annual data presentation. That just this year it may be a little bit shorter because we won't have all the data that we typically have.
Hi, Tanya, this is Gail.
Yep.
I'm curious with the change in the school year and the change of obviously some of these scores, are we as a district looking at any of our, like the STAR data or any other data that we use as growth indicators? Are we looking at those a little bit differently? Or are we kind of being status quo and maybe taking the first 3 quarters? Just curious how we're utilizing that information for this year.
So the same is true of our local assessment data, Gail. We did not give the STAR as many times as we typically would give it. The same is true for the DIBELS data. And actually the STAR and the DIBELS we use for Title I as well, and that was forgiven as well for this year. So we don't have that, the same amount of data that we typically have. Like DIBELS we do at the beginning, the middle, and the end of the year. We did the first 2, we didn't do the end of the year one. So the administration is currently discussing what we should do at the end of the year and then moving into next year. So what are we looking at? We're collecting what standards and what topics were not hit this year so that we make sure that we address those for next year as we're coming back into classes. And there's an online CDT that we've talked about. There's, our assessments that we typically give. Are we looking to potentially give those, but do it virtually? And then we have some other assessments that we can use as well, like Study Island, USA Test Prep. We've talked about those at the secondary level, maybe using those to inform, our practices and how we're going to differentiate moving into next year. So it's still a discussion to best decide what to do because we can't necessarily give some of those assessments that we give in person.
Sure, thank you. And I guess the other portion of that is, how do we determine how effective the remote schooling occurred this last 3 months of the year? And then what are we doing to prepare for next year as we start the fall, knowing that there most likely will be a gap between what could have and should have been learned this last spring to get us ready for the fall? Is there preparations of information of what we're doing to move that forward?
Sure. So we may not have as much quantitative data as we typically do, but we'll be using some qualitative data, some anecdotal data. We're getting some surveys out into the public. Some will be coming this week as well to try to get feedback from families. We've been having talks with teachers as well about, what parts of what they normally teach they didn't hit. Where do we need to go back and readdress some of the gaps that may exist? So we're collecting as much data as we can, knowing that we were not face-to-face in person with some of the things that we normally collect. So it may look a little bit different, but we are still trying to collect some data to inform our practices from the end of this year and then certainly moving into the fall.
Great, thank you for the update.
Sure.
Gail, we'll be looking at the initial survey in the next committee meeting this evening, so we'll be able to kind of conceptualize that a little bit better for you and the rest of the committee.
Great, thanks.
You're welcome.
All right, so then the next section we have are the handbooks for this evening. So we have our elementary one, which encompasses Peters and Slatington, then we have our middle school, and then we have our high school. So Scott and James, I know that it was going to be easier if you project and run through that. So I'm going to unshare at this point, and you guys can go ahead and take that over.
Thank you, Dr. Stoker.
Sorry, give me 1 second. I'm just bringing up the right document. So I'm going to walk through the changes and kind of hand it off to James at a few points, and he's going to bring those up. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Sorry. Anyone? Okay. So the first change that we made is really just a title addition, page 5, the athletic director position for Brian Geist under administration. Beyond that, page 6, when we were looking through the document about, sort of our vision and things like that, and our purpose, it used the word spiritually. James had actually he caught that, and just given the I guess religious undertone of that, we decided that socially actually fit really well, and it fit really well with a lot of our current initiatives in terms of, relationships and trauma-informed care and things like that. On page 7, here's probably the first big change. There was some change in the language and some addition of it. Visitors are welcome on campus only for the purpose of conducting official business and are required to sign in and be screened through our visitor management system at the main entrance office. The district reserves the right to exclude anyone that they deem as potentially disruptive to the normal education process. And then given the implementation or the incoming implementation of the Raptor system, remove the language referring to the collection of IDs because the Raptor system will replace that as a security measure. Page 8 is the same. It's the same language for both buildings. On page 9 and 10, updated our dates for the next year. On page 11, there was the community outreach system update, which was uniform across the district, sort of changing that language from Connect Ed, Blackboard Connect, there's variations to community outreach system. That's page 11. Page 14, a change in language guiding the outside recess decision. James, this might be one that you can kind of pick up on because the parent engagement meetings that you started brought this about.
As part of our family engagement meetings, one of the suggestions that was brought up by a parent was examining our sort of elementary school policy on sending students outside during recess. Previously, it was a 32-degree threshold, or the feels like temperature of 32 degrees. The parents suggested, and we took a look at what other school districts do. Some were very similar, 32 degrees. Some, I believe it was Northwestern, who was 15 degrees, and they were sending their students outside at 16 degrees. And many schools basically created a system where it was up to teacher and administrator discretion. So the idea was we would adapt to that because there are certainly days where it's 31 degrees and not windy, and it's perfectly fine for students to go outside. And there are probably days where it's cold wind and it's 33 degrees and it might not be as appropriate. So that wording change, I'm looking on the page there, Mr. Pine, can you give me the exact wording change there?
Sorry, students will be allowed outside based on teacher discretion unless otherwise directed by building administration.
So this allows a little more flexibility on, what we're going to do to send students out, with the hopes of getting them out as much as possible.
Great. So the next one is on page 16, James. So there was some additional language added, and again, James, actually, this was your addition. Originally, the wellness policy explanation that we had in place really did address the federal law, the relationship of snacks and foods, when they were welcome, when they were expected in the school building. James added some language in regards to cross-contamination.
Sure. I'm looking here, if you look at the screen under wellness policy, the new language begins at that second sentence. To avoid cross-contamination and potential allergy issues, excuse me, we prefer that baked goods come from a quality controlled setting. For instance, it is preferred that families not bring in baked goods from a local bakery. Instead, they should come from a reputable company who certifies the safety of their product, i.e. Entenmann's Donuts or Little Debbie Snacks Cakes. Speaking from sort of a personal experience, both myself and my daughter have a celiac disease. And one of the things that, someone who suffers from allergies or some kind of particular autoimmune disease, it could say at a local bakery, oh, peanut free, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they didn't go back onto the same cutting board and cut it on something that was already used to cut some kind of peanut or gluten or something else. So we decided that through a discussion to put, we prefer, we will not prevent that, but we're going to basically state to the families that we prefer it comes from, baked goods come from that quality controlled setting, although we will not, prevent that from coming into the building. We believe that will help with students with allergy issues and other health concerns.
Great.
Is that, I'm sorry, Scott, this is Gail again. Is that something in the policy just to put maybe like prepackaged instead of that almost makes it sound like that some of our local bakeries who are around are not reputable, which I'm not sure is what we want to say as a community aspect in that regard. So maybe the wording a little bit changed to make it more like prepackaged might make it sound a little bit friendlier.
That's a great comment there, Gail. To be honest, we went back and forth for quite some time trying to play with the wording to make sure it was not offensive, yet I think the word prepackaged sounds great. I think that's something that Dr. Stoker, Mr. Pine, and I can come back to and relook at.
Sure.
This is Michelle. I absolutely agree with Gail.
It makes sense. Yep.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next section, page 21, we had the word vacations used as an excuse with the educational field trip form. We went ahead and changed that to miscellaneous activities, just to kind of discourage the notion that it's a really good idea to take vacations during the school year and kind of, leave it a little bit broader in that regard. 24, we changed the language, or added language, I should say, regarding Act 16, and that's the Compulsory Attendance Law, and the changes that were made to that extended the attendance ages out. So, James, I don't know if you have that up, but there was no great language to pull off a state website or anything, so we kind of compiled some language from a few different sources and put together something that explained when students are to attend school in terms of age. Page 33 was across the board in all the handbooks, but it's the addition of bus and medical needs language just to notify the bus driver and notify us if there is a specific need on a transportation vehicle. So that was 33. Page 45. This was just an addition of a heading for Slatington Elementary School for the clubs and activities, because most of those are not at Peters, they're just at Slatington.
That would be addition right there.
Yeah. Page 48, the changing of the Title I language. Before it said something to the effect of remedial reading program, and it's since been changed to educational program because it reaches a little bit further than just reading remediation, especially in school-wide schools. That would be 48. 51. So 51 and a later one are paired, 51 on 52. We did remove language in the medication section, medication for students section that related to epinephrine auto-injector because we added an entirely separate section to draw attention to the exceptions in the process for that if a student needs an EpiPen. So that would be 51, and then the 52 below the first 52. The first 52, which is it's added language to submit written excuses. So we had this earlier in the document, but here we determined as well, it mentioned calling the nurse if the student was to be out. And we wanted to make sure it was clear that that did not substantiate, that was not an excuse. That was not a documented excuse for the purposes of our files and things like that, that a written excuse would have to come in.
And just so you're aware, and I'll highlight it here on the page, I basically copied and pasted this from our policy previous to this, but we thought because so there might be some confusion for parents that calling into the nurse's line may excuse that child. I wanted to make sure it was clear here as well. So basically it's copied and pasted from prior in the document.
If we go down to 53 and 54, I think it's the bottom of 53, top of 54. We did add links for CHIP and school insurance. Prior to this, there was just an explanation that directed parents to the school website. Now the actual links are available within the handbook.
There.
And then 53, the addition of the physical examination for interscholastic sports. That is basically copy and pasted directly from the secondary buildings and what they use. And it's just for our sixth graders in reality. Page 58, James had put together here the ALICE description for our new ALICE protocols for safety and security. 59, we altered the language a little bit regarding educational rights. There was some language in there that seemed to, it just seemed a little bit confusing in terms of custodial rights, educational rights, and all these various rights that parents and families can have in the variety of family dynamics that we experience. So we altered that to be a little bit more inclusive and reflective of the, the broad law.
And just to share with everybody, the specific line where it's very straightforward. When custody is an issue, legal documentation will be the determining factor in educational rights. And that is a little more direct and easy to read than the previous document.
Yeah. And then the last one is pages 63 through 83, which there's not much to see there. That's the change to our Title I documents. There were not significant changes as a result of our Title I meetings this year. The only thing we did end up changing is it used to be parent involvement or parent engagement, and we changed that to it should be involvement. Is that correct? Sorry,
no, it's issue family engagement plan.
Family engagement, yes, as opposed to parent involvement plan. So taking that old language, which again was fairly narrow, and broadening it out for all of our, again, family dynamics. That's it.
That's all.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions on the elementary handbook? Hearing none, for the board members that we have here this evening, can we have a nomination, I guess not a vote, but can we move that to the board meeting for next Monday for approval?
Michelle and Gary, I'm good
Yeah.
if you guys are.
This
Yep,
is Gary.
I'm fine with it.
Jim and Scott, you did an excellent job. I support it 100%. Go ahead.
I also
So do
believe
I, Gail.
Robin,
This is Michelle.
I think Robin Disler is on as well.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Disler, I didn't see you on there. I apologize. So Dr. Stoker, we'll say go ahead with the elementary handbook to go ahead and put that on the agenda.
All right, thank you very much.
I'm
Thank you.
sorry. I do agree as well. Robin Disler.
Thank you, Mr. Disler. Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Disler.
And we'll make the changes that were suggested based on the feedback as well.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
All right, the next one will be our middle school handbook. All right, we're up and running. Mrs. Chamberlain and Mr. Hauser. If someone's speaking, you're muted.
I was frozen there for a second. I couldn't
Okay.
get it to unmute me. Sorry, it's Jill. So the first thing is that we aligned the table of contents through the changes of page numbers due to the addition of, cleaning things up and adding certain items. I'm sorry, I'm walking as my dog is barking. Okay. Then we, throughout the whole thing, we aesthetically cleaned up the spacing throughout the handbook and things like that to make sure things were aligned and looking the same. The first addition was on page 7, where we defined out, originally it had just said LCTI, and so I defined out what LCTI is for any parent who may not have understood the acronym at first. So that it's Lehigh Carbon Technical Institute. For pages 8 and pages 9, in the highlighted areas, we changed it had previously said Connect Ed to community outreach so that it was similar in all of the books and for what we're doing because our system is changing. Page 10, there was verbiage added to reinforce that it was PA law for attendance, PA law, and school policy in which we were following and which we were complying with and which was being described. Page 11, we added even more clarification on the fact that the tardy minutes can accumulate and we redefined unlawful absences and what are attendance and things like that, but also surely the line where tardy minutes can accumulate. Page 20 is the bus emergency section, which we all added. I didn't put in here in my notes that I changed things to add links for CHIP or things like that. So we may have passed over that, but I added the links to all of that. And then on page 23, under our dress and grooming, because of the concern that where it says no under headscarves, it had bandanas where people may be using a bandana like. So I added the statement, should we need to comply with CDC guidelines, personal face coverings are to be worn in the proper manner and may be made of a variety of materials. So that in case someone is using a bandana face mask, that is fine, and they won't be questioned. And then on page 30, the addition of Alice, which is highlighted in yellow. And again, you can see throughout, we cleaned it up and just added the hyperlinks for like Safe to Say and the CHIP and all that stuff. And that's it.
Okay. Are there any questions on the middle school handbook?
Hi, Mrs. Chamberlain. This is Gail again.
Hey, Gail.
How are you? Just a
Long
quick
time no
question. Yeah, right. Quick question for you. I know in the elementary book, we do usually have students who tend to have parents or somebody come in. Is there anything listed in yours in regards to the new protocol with the programs checking in for parents or spouse, adults?
I believe it is. If you, I don't have if you can scroll up, I want to say, I thought it was in there, the vector. Everybody looked at it. So we had for visitors.
Is it right here under visitors?
Yes. So that it complies with your welcome on campus only for purpose of conducting official business are required to register at the middle school front office in accordance with the trespass laws of the state of Pennsylvania. All visitors must provide a photo ID and obtain a visitor's badge for easy identification.
Sounds good. I was just trying to make sure that we were keeping all of the verbiage the same as we make that change. Thank you.
Absolutely.
This is Gary. I did not see the beginning of the handbook, but I did hear you say Lehigh Carbon Technical Institute.
LCTI, yes.
It's not carbon.
County.
County. Oh my gosh.
No, it's
Thank
not.
you.
It's Lehigh County. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. Okay.
you know what? I've always called it Lehigh Carbon in my head. I am so sorry, Gary.
That's all right.
I will change that. Thank you for the catch.
Well, as I said, I heard you say it. That's why I caught it. So
Oh,
I did not see that part when you were showing it up. So that's fine. As long
I
as we
am,
can.
you know, for 14 years, I've been in the district 14 years. I've always referred to it as LCTI. And if somebody asked me, I'd say Lehigh Carbon Technical Institute.
Right. It's not.
Isn't that? Oh, wow. Okay. We will change that. That's not a problem.
Thank
And
you.
my apologies on that one.
Thank you, Gary.
This is Michelle Martineau here. I have a retroactive question for the elementary based on something Jill just said, or Mrs. Chamberlain just said. Regarding the face coverings, do we have language like that as well in our elementary handbooks?
We don't, no. We have, I'm trying to think. I don't think there's anything in there that covers that now.
Could we add that?
Yes, I think we can certainly add something.
Sure.
The reason it came up with the middle school handbook is that there was originally something in there related to bandanas and secondary students not being able to wear those. You know, for gang affiliation, anything like that, we didn't want them to wear them. But now under the new PPE, that is part of it. But we can certainly add something to the elementary handbook to reflect the same.
I just figured going forward with COVID and until we have, you know, regular vaccinations, that we're probably going to run into some of these face mask material, you know,
Sure.
situations. It just occurred to me while she was talking. Thank you, guys. Sorry to interrupt the middle school and backtrack.
No, that's okay. Thank you.
thing.
And we do have it in our policies too, in our safety policy when we talk about, you know, how we're cleaning buildings and those types of things. We do say PPE gear as well. So it is still in policy, but we will add that in our handbook to make that more, you know, forward facing.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anything else on the middle school or elementary handbook before we move to the high school? Okay, we'll go into the high school handbook. And Mr. Velocity, Mr. Hauser.
Yes, hello everyone. How are you today?
Good, Bob. How are you?
Doing well.
Doing well.
All right, let me try to open this a different way. That's going to give me a problem. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Our first item in our handbook is page 4. We have our Northern Lehigh goal, and we changed our goal to reflect our CFES essential skills and our focus on college and career readiness. And as you can see here, we have the essential skills listed there: goal setting, teamwork, leadership, agility, perseverance, and networking. And we are actually going to be shifting gears to align our positive behavior support and intervention to reflect this. Our next change is just updating our personnel in the building with Mr. Geist, the athletic director, and we added our emails to the bottom there. Next, page 10, we have the updated calendar for next year. And this is the latest one that Mr. Sherman sent out to us. Next, a couple pages later, on page 12, We updated, as the other buildings did, our community outreach system, formerly Connect Ed. And also on page 13, we updated the reference. So we replaced all the Connect Ed references to our community outreach system. On page 17, we updated our discipline for misuse of cell phones to incorporate more restorative practices, and just stated some more details as to calling parents and in order for them to retrieve the device if they so wish, or we hold it till the next day. It's just a minor update there. Any questions so far?
I just want to let you know, as I'm projecting, I think the yellow and some of the page numbers got changed when it got downloaded. So I'm trying my best to find it as we go, but I think it just got altered a little bit when it got downloaded.
Oh, okay. The page numbers, the page numbers I'm referring to are the ones from the tracked version. So yes, when we track the document, the pages get misaligned a bit. So yeah. I apologize for that. Okay, going back. The next is the Ferpa update. I have that. I actually have that, Dr. Stoker, on page 18 of the track document. This is the same information. The other buildings updated the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, aka Ferpa. This is the same language we all have adopted into our handbooks. David, we're going into attendance. You want to take over here?
Sure, no problem.
Bless you.
Thank you.
Page 24 is the excessive absences and mandated attendance.
So like everybody else at the other levels, we updated the handbook language to reflect any changes to the compulsory attendance laws throughout the state. We also took some time to add some clarifying language just as to the overall truancy process, what parents can expect, what students can expect, defining what are and are not lawful absences and unlawful absences and whatnot. Spelled out a little bit more of the excessive absence and mandated attendance, what goes into that, and specifically the types of absences that go into that. These explanatory things were added just based on conversations that Mr. Velocity, Mrs. Chamberlain, and myself have had throughout the year when it's come to attendance. Just kind of keeping some anecdotal notes on where the most common questions were and, where places were that we could better explain, to parents and students. So that language is throughout. You can scroll down, please.
Tell me when.
You should be good right there. That's good. Definitions for truancy and habitual truancy were put into there along with the number of absences. We have also added language pertaining to some restorative measures that we have worked out with our local magistrate. Our local magistrate has been very flexible and very open to restorative practices rather than just punitive measures for students who are habitually truant, getting them back into school and focusing on academic improvement and, even career guidance in some cases, allowing them to do some career research and academic improvement in lieu of fines or community service and things of that nature. So we wrote some language in there just to reflect that we might work with our local MDJ to put plans in place there based on the needs of the students. And scroll down a little bit more, Dr. Stoker, please. Thank you. We added in the consequences for habitual truancy. These are as per the compulsory attendance laws. And we also added some provisions for chronically absent students. There is a subtle difference between habitually truant and chronically absent, a lot of times depending on the age of the students. So I do expect this number to go down this year, but we wanted to add some explanation that we might put some supports in place for those students as well. These are students who are missing at least 10% of the school year, roughly 18 or more absences. So just kind of fleshed out what the protocols are for attendance, by and large.
Thank you, Mr. Hauser. The next part is the addition of in-school suspensions. Speaking of more restorative practices and consequences to keep our students in school more, we're looking to add that that dimension to our consequences to cut down on out-of-school suspension, because I don't think anybody would disagree that we serve our students best when they are with us. And this is one of the measures that we would like to employ for next year to keep our students in school, to improve attendance, and also to correct disruptive behavior and work with our students so that they can reflect on what they're doing and problem solve and use conflict resolution. Any questions so far? Okay. Moving on, Dr. Stoker, we just updated leaving school without permission. Keep going down. Yeah, it's alphabetical, so yeah, with the exception of bullying. That went along with harassment. So up a little bit, right there. Just updating on the language and leaving school without permission. Okay. And a little bit further down, positive behavior interventions and support. We updated a language in there to be a little bit more descriptive as far as our restorative practices and our use of PBIS to intervene and for it to be an intervention to correct problem behaviors and to encourage positive behaviors and work through any distracting or disruptive behaviors that occur in the school building. And also, again, we have here the essential skills are going to be embedded into our not only our practices but our vision statement. And we're very excited about shifting gears and employing this. We've unfortunately, because of COVID-19, a lot of our events and our schedule affected our ability to follow through on that. So we're looking to hit the ground running in the beginning of the school year. Well, no matter what, we'll be able to adapt to it. So far this year, since we've been locked down or shut down, Maria Van Norman's doing an outstanding job reaching out to all our scholars, and our school counselors doing a great job of reaching out to all of our students in exposing them to internships and employment opportunities. That I just learned that one of our students just got hired as an intern at the local quarry, I believe. So he was pretty excited, and he emailed Mrs. Crucial and myself to thank us for sending that out. So hey, we're a team here. I know that Dr. Stoker sent me some information on that, as well as Ms. Plank. So thank you for forwarding that information to us. And also our local IU has been doing a nice job with that too. Right below that, college and careers for every student. Right there. Just a little bit more information, getting some more verbiage as far as what CFES is. It's mentoring, it's essential skills, it's getting students ready for a career. One of the things that's very important here is that college is not necessarily for everyone. And if you say, if you're promoting just college and not addressing career, it sometimes it inadvertently would put down somebody that didn't go to college. Well, college is we're redefining that as any type of post-secondary training. So we got into a little bit more verbiage here, because the idea of CFES is for every student in the high school. All right, we will have our student leaders, which we'll refer to our scholars, but they are our leaders to bring the rest of the students along, because a career is for every student. Any questions so far? Okay. Next is, you scroll down a little bit further, Dr. Stoker, to the bus emergency. This is the same. I have it here 55, but I believe it's going to come up earlier on your screen. The bus emergency is the same information that the other buildings had put into their handbook. Yes, right there. Same information. A little further down, we also input our ALICE security protocols, which is similar to the other handbooks. It just spells out what ALICE is, and that we will conduct monthly drills, and they're appropriate for age and developmental level of the students. There you go. And lastly, we have, I believe it's under nurses, a little bit further down, Dr. Stoker, just about the EpiPens. Yes, the second paragraph there. We thank you, Mrs. Chamberlain, for letting me borrow your language out of your handbook. So this is the same information and verbiage that is in the middle school handbook there. And ladies and gentlemen, these are the proposed changes for the high school for next year. Questions?
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Velocity and Mr. Hauser. Any questions on the high school handbook?
Hi, Dr. Stoker, just a real quick question. I know we all touched on the ALICE protocols. Are they all consistent verbiage and what it is between all of the handbooks?
I believe it should be. We put it together in a shared doc and we cut and pasted. I can go back and make sure.
I just wanted to make sure, because it sounded like everybody had it added. So just want to make sure we added the same language across the district. Thank you for checking.
Sure.
If I may, Dr. Stoker and Mrs. Husak, it's the same language, but how it is presented to the students obviously varies depending on grade and age level.
Sure.
We do it with a different approach, especially with our youngest students.
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, any further questions on the handbooks? Not hearing any, can we have board permission to move that to next Monday for a vote for all of our handbooks?
Mr. Fedorcha, you good?
Yes, yes. Thank you. Great job. Thank you very much, guys.
Ms. Martineau?
Ms. Marvin?
Yes,
I'm fine with that. Thank you, Bob.
All right,
Yes,
Dr.
Gail,
Stoker.
this is Mrs. Martineau. I'm good.
Perfect. Thank you. Dr. Stoker, we're good to move those to the agenda.
Thank you very much. And thank you to the principals and for all their work that they put into revising the handbooks this year and every year. Anything else for the education section of this evening's agenda before we move into policy? Okay, not hearing anything, we're going to move into the policy section. We are going to go a little bit out of order. We have Mrs. Molatoris joining us this evening, but she does have another meeting to attend. So we're going to look at policy 335 first, and then we'll go back through the rest of the policies. Sherry, do you want me to share that, or do you want to take the screen over?
Go ahead, you can share it. That's fine.
Okay.
Okay, so hello everyone. This is a policy that was supposed to be on a couple months ago, but we ended up having some legal questions from the FMLA and whether we can stack our sick days along with FMLA. So in other words, if they can stack them, mean using sick days first and then FMLA, or if we had to use them concurrent. So we kind of held off on this policy till we got some guidance from attorneys, and not at our cost. The IU actually went out and got some of those things, and we discussed them at our HR meeting. So the first part of the policy, very simple changes. They changed it to be classified employees. I mean, it's support employees instead of classified. That's normal language change that they're making in PSBA policies right now. FMLA requests are coming to the Director of Human Resources, not the superintendent, and that's where they have always been coming. So it's just a change to follow formality of what's always been happening. And then the last one on the last page is just where that during is highlighted, because what was determined was that although it was an opinion letter that came out from FMLA, the attorneys have said that we can actually do it the way we're doing it. The way we're doing it is better because it gives them a longer period of time to be off if they want to. It would become an issue only if somebody would challenge that issue, and they feel that nobody's going to challenge it because they're better off. The recommendation from everybody within our HR group was that if you're still stacking, allow the people to continue stacking, and we'll deal with it if anybody would ever fight it. But it wouldn't make any sense for them to fight it because they'd have to use the sick days at the same time they use FMLA, where we're now allowing them to use the sick days first and then they can go on FMLA leave. So it would make no sense if anybody would fight that. But that's it. Very simple changes to that policy, nothing major, but that's why the holdup was, because we were waiting for information from attorneys on that last segment. Any questions?
I can't read the document, so what are you saying? They're allowed to take sick days before FMLA? Can you clarify?
Correct, and that's always been our policy. The policy actually says the employee may utilize such paid leave during FMLA. May says that they have the option. They can either use it during or they can use it before, and we've always allowed people to use them before.
Thank you. I knew that's what we had done before. I just want to make sure that's what was in the policy yet.
That is still a policy. We changed absolutely nothing in that area.
Okay, any other questions on this policy this evening? Not hearing any, can we have board permission to move this to next Monday for a first reading?
Any objection from our board members on?
No, go ahead.
No.
Just
Dr.
driving.
Stoker,
I have no issue.
Thank you. Dr. Stoker, you can go ahead and move policy 335 to the agenda.
Okay, thank you, and thank you, Sherry, for joining us this evening.
You're welcome. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night. The next policy we'll go back in order now is student records, number 216. This policy was a bit antiquated. It's from 2007. That's the last time that it was revised. We had to add this policy because of the Ferpa information that we added to the handbooks. So we added information to the handbooks from Ferpa, and that was at the recommendation of our attorney. We reached out to our attorney to get proper language, she gave us information on what should be in the handbooks with regard to FERPA and what should be in policy. But when she pulled our policy off our website, our policy was not up to date enough to encompass what it should if we added that FERPA language to the handbooks. So, in order to make our handbooks work and for the policy to be approved in time for the start of school year, we have to bring it to the board meeting this month for a first reading and then hopefully a second reading and approval in August so that we're ready to start the school year with the appropriate language. So going through this policy with regard to student records, the first part just essentially talks about the board recognizes that, the responsibility for collecting, retaining, disclosing, and protection of student records, that there is a legal requirement to maintain confidentiality with regard to those records. It defines attendance, what's considered directory information, what's not included in directory information, when we're allowed to disclose, what an educational record is, who eligible students are, parents, what personally identifiable information is, what the definition is for those pieces, what the definition is for a student, and then it talks about the delegation of responsibility. So the superintendent or designee shall be responsible for developing, implementing, and monitoring student record plans, that all district personnel having access to those records should receive training about what those student record plans are and how we, essentially what our procedures are regarding that. That any employees of the district, teachers, whoever they should be that come in contact with the records, that they follow the guidelines. The guidelines are essentially for collecting, retaining, disclosing, and protecting records, that there are safeguards to protect student records, that we have to ensure that parents and eligible students, including those who are disabled or have primary language other than English, are effectively notified of their rights. And that comes through the handbook, like we discussed a little bit earlier, and that they have to receive that information annually. That they have the right to inspect or review the copy of the student records. Again, it's for the parents or any eligible student, which means they're 18 or older. That there are procedures for requesting any amendments to a student's educational record if something is inaccurate. Procedures for requesting and conducting hearings to challenge the contents of student record. For enumerating and defining the types, locations, and people responsible for those educational records, determining types of personally identifiable information, that's directory information, establishing guidelines for the disclosure and redisclosure of student educational records and that personally identifiable information, reasonable methods to ensure that school district officials obtain access only to those educational records which they have legitimate educational interest. So, if it's a student in a teacher's class or if it's a secretary who has to pull information for a student, they have to have a legitimate reason for doing that. That we maintain those records of request for access, that we ensure appropriate review, retention, disposal, and protection of those records. And then there's information about student recruitment, missing child registration information, which we have to keep by law as well. And then this is the part that had to be essentially added, the most recent piece for FERPA. So again, we have language in our handbooks discussing FERPA. This essentially says we are allowed to share information and disclose information to certain groups, and those are other school officials like teachers or other educational agencies that may request it. So for instance, if we get a request of records from another school district, we can share that information once those parents have said that their child is going to be enrolling in that school. Officials of other schools or school systems or institutions of post-secondary education where a student is going, representatives of the U.S. Comptroller General, the U.S. Attorney General, Secretary of Education, that we can share records with them as is required, in connection with financial aid to state and local officials or authorities for whom information is specifically allowed to be reported or disclosed by a state statute that governs or is concerned with the juvenile justice system or adjudications, organizations conducting studies for or on behalf of the school district. So sometimes we sign agreements with institutions to do that. To accrediting institutions, parents of eligible students if the students are dependent for IRS tax purposes, to comply with judicial orders, appropriate officials in connection with a health or safety emergency, agency caseworkers of a state or local child welfare agency like Children and Youth, the Secretary of Agriculture or other authorized representatives from a Food and Nutrition Service. So these are some of the groups that we can release information to. So essentially in our handbook, it says, here's the FERPA information for this year. Our policy supports all of that and what is directory information. And if a parent does not want us to share out that directory information, there's a form that they can fill out that will be maintained in the main offices of each of our buildings and in the district office. And if there's something that they do not want to be shared, they can opt out of that information being shared and just write down what information they do not want to be shared out regarding their child. So again, this had to be included this year and was updated because of the FERPA information that we updated in the handbook. Any questions on this policy? Not hearing anything, do we have permission for this to be moved to the board level for a vote next Monday?
Yes.
First reading, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Mrs. Robin Isler, yes.
Yes.
Mr. Fedorcha?
Yes.
Dr. Stoker, you can go ahead and move policy 216 to the agenda for next Monday.
Thank you very much. All right, our next policy again became up because of a handbook change. So this is our electronic device policy. This was updated in 2010. And really there aren't a whole lot of updates to it that came from PSBA, but there was one that we wanted to update. And if you look at the section in yellow, it says currently in here on district buses and vehicles that students are not allowed to use electronic devices. However, in some of our IEPs and some of our students, as they're riding home from school, they listen to music on their devices. They may be doing homework on devices. You know, we're one-to-one now, so we have a lot more devices going back and forth than in 2010 when this policy was originally written. So when we put it into our handbooks, we want to make sure that it reflects what's actually happening in practice. So the recommendation is to essentially take this out of here, that you know, we're not going to forbid any longer on buses or vehicles electronic devices, that students are allowed to use those either per their IEP or you know, if they're doing homework on them, if they're, you know, doing anything that they need to kind of do on the way back and forth from school and home. Currently, the only students that typically don't are the ones that are in Peters Elementary School, but students in Slatington all the way up through high school do currently use them. And that's at the discretion of administration and bus drivers or van drivers. So we would be looking to change that part. Further down, these are the recommendations of PSBA. So it talks about off-campus activities and that the policy shall allow shall also apply to student conduct that occurs off school property and would otherwise violate the code of student conduct if any of the following circumstances exist. The conduct occurs during the time the student is traveling to and from school or traveling to and from a school-sponsored activity. Number 2 has not changed. Number 3, student expression or conduct materially and substantially disrupts the operations of the school. Administration reasonably anticipates the expression or conduct is likely to materially and substantially disrupt the operation of school. So if we have any of those circumstances, you know, this policy would apply. Number 4 changed as well a little bit. Essentially says that we have a direct nexus to attendance or school-sponsored activity. For example, a transaction conducted outside of the school pursuant to an agreement made in school that would violate the code of student conduct if conducted in school. So if there's any kind of transaction that happens through an electronic device, it's off school property, but it creates a nexus to things that are happening in school, then we would have, jurisdiction. We'd be able to essentially handle those, that event or that incident. Conduct involves the theft or vandalism of school property, or there is otherwise a nexus between the proximity or timing of the conduct in relation to the student's attendance at school or a school-sponsored activity. So this just talks about when essentially we can, deal with disciplining a student for misconduct using electronic devices. And then a little bit later on, it says the building administrator may grant approval for possession and or use of a telephone, paging device, or beeper. Those are kind of gone. We use other electronic devices these days. So that's been updated for our current technology. Again, this policy came up because of making changes in the handbook, but then it opened up for other changes that PSBA had recommended since 2010. Any questions on this one?
Dr. Stoker, so just to clarify, the yellow highlighted part on page 1, you're looking to remove, is that correct? Just so I understand what.
Correct. We're saying that now electronic devices will be permitted on district buses and vehicles at the discretion of the administration and the driver. So we're looking to remove that where it was originally prohibited.
And this, I guess just a question, is this also for our athletics if they're going to an athletic event?
Yes, it would transfer to that as well.
So then in that case, even if they would not have an IEP, they could, for instance, listen to music.
Correct.
Okay.
So maybe, Gail, a good point. Maybe we want to make this administration coach and driver as well, because if there's a coach leading that activity, that they would be somebody that would say whether or not students are permitted to be using them.
Sure. I'm just trying to wrap my head around it. That's all.
Sure.
Thanks for the clarification.
Any other questions on this one?
No, this is Gary. I support that tremendously because I know my kids listening to music or being distracted in their own way keeps them from getting in trouble.
Sure.
Gail, go ahead with that if that's okay with everybody else.
This is Rob, and I'm fine with it.
This is Michelle. I'm fine with it as well.
Sounds good. Thank you, board members. Dr. Stoker, for reading 1, we can go ahead and put policy 237 on the agenda.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Okay, moving through our policies, we already did the medical and family leaves. The next one is our emergency preparedness policy. So this policy essentially was updated for a lot of our drills, including ALICE. It talks about our MOU that we have with law enforcement, school safety drills, our emergency preparedness plan, just generally anything that has to do with emergency preparedness or drilling. So in the purpose section, it says the board recognizes its responsibility for the safety of students, staff, visitors, and our facilities. Therefore, the board shall provide the facilities, equipment, and training necessary to protect against hazards, emergencies, including but not limited to natural disasters, hazardous chemicals, fires, weapons, bomb threats, intruders, terrorism, communicable diseases, and pandemics. Advanced planning, training, practice, and comprehensive implementation are key components in protecting the safety and security of the school community. So again, that's kind of the general gist of the policy. So the first one there is just changing Pennsylvania Emergency Management Agency to PEMA, adding in local law enforcement agencies in the next section, that the board requires that emergency preparedness and emergency evacuation and school security drills are to be conducted at intervals required by the state. We have a calendar that we maintain as a district. I think we have a really good system in place. Anytime we have any kind of drill that's being run by our school buildings, under the direction of our school police officer or principals or other administrators, we record that immediately. So as soon as that happens, we put that into a a giant spreadsheet that we keep, and we keep track of all our drills. And then when that has to be uploaded through our IT department to PIMS, it gets uploaded at the end of the year, so that we make sure that we're doing all of our drills that we're required to do every month. Definitions just goes through what a school security drill is, school safety and security assessment, that we have to do that. Delegation of responsibilities. So it talks about all of our stakeholders and what their responsibilities are in this. That annually on or before April 10th, the superintendent shall certify that emergency evacuation drills and school security drills have been conducted in the manner prescribed by law. In accordance with the state law and regulations, the superintendent shall execute a memorandum of understanding with each local law department that has jurisdiction over the school property. So we have to get an MOU. It's every other year, but it carries over every year, signed by anybody that would handle our buildings. So state police out at Peters, our Slatington police department on our main campus with our 3 buildings, or 4 including the district office. So we get that done every year for any of the responders that we would have attending to our buildings. That the board directs the school safety and security coordinator to periodically complete a school safety and security assessment in accordance with the provisions of law and established criteria. That would be Officer Naus, and he did work with ISS under our Safe Schools grant to help conduct the major assessment that we did, of all of our schools. Emergency planning under the guidelines section, that the emergency preparedness plan shall be accessible in each district building, be reviewed at least annually, and be modified as necessary. A copy of the plan shall be made accessible to the county emergency management agency, each local police department, and each local fire department that have jurisdiction over the school property. The district shall obtain assurances from each appropriate agency that the emergency preparedness plan will be safeguarded and maintained confidentially. So we are in the process of updating that plan. Officer Naus has been working with ISS and all of our first responders on parts of that plan to update those, as well as our administration. Appropriate information regarding the emergency preparedness plan shall be communicated to students, parents, guardians, staff, and the community and other relevant stakeholders. So we do share out parts of our plan and prep all of our stakeholders for what those drills may look like on campus. But there are parts of that document that we do keep secret for safety reasons. Annually by September 30th, the district shall assemble information required to assist local police and fire departments in responding to an emergency. The required information shall be deployed immediately to the incident command post in the event of an emergency incident or disaster. Schools and school buses or transportation vehicles owned or leased by the district shall be made available to local, county, and state officials for emergency planning and exercises. Our continuity of student and learning core operations. So this is all new based upon what we've been experiencing this spring. So there's a lot of new language to say, what happens in a pandemic or other emergency circumstances that we may not have planned for. Now I think we'll be a little bit better prepared, knowing that, these things can happen. Superintendent or designee shall determine whether schools shall be closed or the educational program suspended to safeguard the student and staff health and safety. State officials may also direct schools to close in order to mitigate the spread of infection or illness in designated emergencies. The district shall make provisions for the continuity of student learning during school closings or excessive absences in accordance with the law. Again, this is a lot of what we experienced this spring with the pandemic. A lot of things were forgiven by the state as far as, not having to meet the 180-day requirement or the 900 or 990 hours for our elementary and secondary schools. But in the absence of that, it does give the superintendent those abilities to make some of those decisions. And then it talks about web-based instruction. We can mail lessons and assignments. We can have instruction via local television or radio stations like we had PBS 39 has been doing for some of our younger students. And then other activities as described in our continuity of education plan. Talks about education and training. and that we should provide mandatory training to school employees on school safety and security based on the district's needs and in accordance with the law. Training shall address any combination of one or more of the following areas. So this essentially says that employees are required to complete a minimum of 3 hours of training every 5 years in these types of things: situational awareness, trauma-informed approaches, behavioral health awareness, suicide and bullying awareness, substance use, emergency training drills, and then identification or recognition of student behavior that may indicate threats. Required drills, emergency preparedness drill. You can hear there's all sorts of emergency vehicles going down my street right now. But essentially, emergency preparedness drills, fire drills are required, school security drills, and it talks about what they look like. It talks about the superintendent or designee may conduct additional school security drills in district schools after the first 90 days. Up to 2 additional security drills per year may be conducted in place of the required fire drills. That the superintendent or designee shall oversee the instruction and training of the students and school employees, notify and request assistance from local law enforcement and emergency management agencies, notify parents and guardians and students attending schools where the school drills may be happening. We do a lot of that with our ALICE drills. Talks about bus evacuations, that we must do that twice a year. That's right as soon as we come back to school, and then again in March. And then finally, our Safe to Say Something program, which is the anonymous reporting system that comes into the school anytime there's a report, and that our administrators handle and go through that incident and bring it to its conclusion. Any questions on this policy?
Dr. Stoker, I do have one question. I know I had read recently that there were some changes that could be coming through the Pennsylvania education for some of the pandemic type online learning type things is becoming additional mandatory training for some of our staff. Is that something that this policy may have to get updated again, or are you fairly confident that what we have in here as mandatory trainings we're pretty sure on at this point?
There's a chance that policy can be changed at any time. I know when we were doing the wellness policy, we updated it, and then the law changed really quickly after we had just updated. We had to update it again to reverse what we had put in there. So you never know, especially as things are unfolding as they are, in these uncertain times. I would say for what we need to have currently, this covers it. But again, if things change, we may be looking at updating it again.
And just that, if I may, if a federal or state legislation is passed that's not reflected in this, that will not, be a hindrance to us with being compliant with the law. We'll just have to update the policy then. We won't wait. We won't wait to implement any of those new mandates just because our policy is not updated.
Okay.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Any other questions on this one?
Nope.
Members?
Hearing none, do we have permission to move this to next Monday for a first reading?
Carrie, yes.
Thank you,
Mr.
Dr.
Michelle,
Stoker.
yes.
Robin, yes.
Sounds good. Dr. Stoker, we have board approval for 8:05 to go to the agenda.
Thank you very much. All right, our next policy falls in line with that. It's 805.1, and this is the relations with law enforcement agencies. So you'll see a lot of duplicated information from the previous policy, but this essentially just, the first one talked about, school safety and emergency situations. This talks about how we're going to handle it with law enforcement agencies. So taking what we just talked about, what does their involvement look like, and at what point do we involve them? So the purpose of this policy is that the board recognizes that cooperation with law enforcement agencies is considered essential for protecting students and staff, maintaining a safe environment in schools, and safeguarding district property. It talks about the authority there, a definition essentially of what an incident is. The guidelines, again, this is the memorandum of understanding that we have to have with various law enforcement agencies, indicating that they do plan to help us, should we have the need. And it would have to be, it would have to include all of the first responder groups that we work with. So state police, Slatington police, who we typically work with and who would respond to our buildings. Students with disabilities, that we provide a copy of our administrative regulations and procedures for behavior support developed in accordance with the special education plan to local police departments that have jurisdiction over school property. And updated copies shall be provided each time the administrative regulations and procedures for behavior support are revised by the district. So this is certainly something that we plan to do. We also, these two policies that we're talking about, 805 and 805.1, we're speaking about them this evening. They'll go to a vote, with your permission, for next Monday. But next Monday afternoon, we actually have our Safe Schools Committee meeting with all of our first responders. So we are going to be sharing out those policies. If there are any changes or anything that any edits that need to be made tonight, we'll share those out with first responders next Monday before they come to the board for a first reading. So if they have anything else to add in there, we will certainly take that into consideration. Finally, the training, that we do have to open up some of our trainings that that we provide to our school teachers, staff, administration, to our first responder groups as well. And it talks about what those trainings have to be. For instance, our trauma-informed approaches, restorative practices, suicide awareness and prevention, child abuse recognition and reporting. And we do offer these regularly. We were actually supposed to have a Stop the Bleed training, which talks about if we're ever in an incident where we have a school shooter or where somebody has been injured and we need to apply a tourniquet, we're doing training for Stop the Bleed, and that was one of the trainings we had to cancel due to the pandemic. But we plan to host that again and invite our first responders in to partake in that. So this is something that we do and has been our practice, regardless of, if it's mandated by policy or not. We've been doing it already. When do we refer to local law enforcement? So that talks about when we get local law enforcement involved in any of our situations within our schools. This is a Safe Schools report. Again, we talked about annually by July 31st, that this information gets all uploaded to through PIMS to PDE. So when we've had any of our drills in any of our buildings, the report that Frank has to give to the board annually, all of that information that we're required to do, we have to essentially certify that we have done it through that report. That gets submitted through the IT department, through Mr. Hill and Mr. Link signing off on that, and goes to the state. So that is essentially this very similar to the last policy, just how we're engaging with law enforcement. Any questions on that? Okay, hearing none, do we have permission to move that Monday night to the board level for a first reading?
This is Gary. Madam, yes.
Michelle,
I'm
yes.
fine.
Sounds good, Dr. Stoker. Board approved 805.1 to go to the agenda on Monday for first reading.
All right, thank you very much. Sounds good.
Tanya, excuse me, this is Gary.
Okay.
Is that meeting next week at the same time? Is that still scheduled for the same time?
The Safe Schools meeting?
Yes.
Yes, it's at 2:00 p.m. It'll be virtually instead of obviously in our,
Sure.
in our boardroom. But yes, 2:00 till
2:00.
about 3:20 we're scheduled. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Anything else for policy discussion this evening? Okay, thank you everyone for your discussion, your comments, and approval to move things to the board for next Monday. At this point, we're going to conclude our education policy meeting, and we're going to jump into our next committee meeting. So I'm going to unshare and let Mr. Link share.
Okay, good evening, everyone. I'm going to share my screen now for the Community Relations Committee. And we have two topics on the agenda this evening. The first one is Mr. Hill and Mr. Kern will be giving an update on the new website. And then I will be sharing out some information on a parent survey regarding fall instructional options and other considerations that we hope to release to the community tomorrow. So that being said, Mrs. Martineau, I ask you to open the meeting.
That sounds great, Matt. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Hill, if you can introduce the website update, and then you and your team can take it from there. Mr. Kern, when you're ready to share your screen, let me know and I'll stop sharing.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Link. I'm going to just give you a quick timeline on the website. Our webmasters are still hard at work at the website. We have Mrs. Janet Bayshore, Mrs. Corey DeBilio, and Mr. Andy Kern all working on the website. They have made some progress, even though they have been spending a lot of time with the continuity of education plan with their students. They're still looking like we're on schedule for the website. So our plan at this point is to do a internal release on July 1st. We're still planning to hit that target date. What that means is we will do an internal release of the website, and we will release that to the board members, to the administration and staff to look at and to suggest changes at that point. And our plans then are to we'll have approximately a month to work on the website and make some changes. And we are planning on still releasing the website to the public on August 1st. That is still our plans, and it looks like we are on schedule for that. So I would like to now turn it over to Mr. Andy Kern, so he can go ahead and demonstrate some of the progress that we've made.
Thank you, Eric. Whenever, am I okay to present, Mr. Link?
I believe so. I stopped sharing my screen. Thank you, Mr. Kern. Nice to see you, Mr. Kern.
Nice to see you as well. Nice to see everyone. Good to see everyone is doing well and staying safe and sane, hopefully. All right, so let me just turn on my presenting here. Can everyone see my screen?
We can see you.
Okay. I'm getting him. Okay, there. Sorry. Sorry, I'm getting a system preferences issue here. I'll be with you in just 1 second here. Apparently, Chrome does not have. Sorry, I apologize terribly for this. I'm going to just have to quick pop out and restart Chrome so that it can cast. I'm sorry. I'll be right back.
I think as Mr. Kern is transitioning here, I think that, you know, the events since March 13th until now just kind of reinforces the need for easily accessible, fully accessible, and easily navigable websites.
Okay, I think I'm good now. Okay. Okay, can everyone see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Sorry about that.
Yes.
Weird little system preference. I apologize for the delay there. Anyway, so here is the new district website. As we had talked about in previous meetings, we are bringing everything from all the different buildings, district office, high school, middle school, Slayton Elementary, and Peters Elementary under one umbrella. You'll notice not too much on the homepage here has really changed since we last talked. my workflow, I usually like to focus on the internals and get everything else done, and then worry about the home pages last, so that there are pages that are already created that I can then link to, kind of the same way as you wouldn't create a table of contents before you really know what's going to be in the book itself. So that's sort of how. But under district office, most of this is all set and ready to go, as are most of the channels. We've got our mission statement, district goals, things like that. Administration, everyone has their pages created for themselves, and each department has a message that we can put out there. So on the individual pages, for example, Mr. Link has his photo, his contact information, his message from last school year, which we will update with any messages for the start of next school year. His Twitter feed is off to the left as well, so people can kind of find him that way if they aren't already following him. And then any other documents like performance standards and things like that. Same thing with Dr. Stoker and the other administrative roles. The staff directory is pretty much populated at this point. I think we have nearly everyone in there. So if you're looking for a particular staff member, you can search. And then we also have sort of filters over here for the different buildings that break it down into the different departments and grade levels, so that you can try to access the person you're looking for that way. School board has their section here. Policies, board members are also within our directory database now. Agendas and minutes will be posted similar to what we used to do on the old site. It's a little bit more streamlined now. Instead of a table, now we've just got 2 lists, and we have the entire archive of board agendas going back 20 years now, which took a little while to get in there, but they're all there now. Our usual employment information. There's a calendar that syncs to our Google Calendar, and a contact page with all of the information. And there's different ways to access it from over here as well. I believe contact is, there it is. So you have these little quick links off to the side. High school. I'm not going to go through every page if that's what you're worrying right now, but I just wanted to kind of give a quick overview of some of the sections. Things like the Little Theater, we have information on musicals going back to 1971, so that's pretty neat. A lot of that information is stuff from the old website. We're just moving it over. Middle school as well. Staff pages, principal pages set up very similar to what the administration pages under district office are set up as. Corey is working very hard on the Slatington Elementary site. She would be better to talk about that. And Janet Bayshore is also working very hard on the Peters site. Athletics, we have a lot of information that Mr. Geis has shared with me to post on the website. Some of these home pages, like I said, are still a work in progress. I do the home pages last usually, but the other information, things like our new live streaming system, there's links to that. The new lightning safety system at the stadium, the widget for that system is in there. So some pretty cool stuff that the athletic department is upgrading. Our old Ring of Honor inductees, all of that's been moved over. Cafeteria menus, resources and forums I'm still working on. That's just a section that needs a little bit of tidying up. And then there's login and links separated into staff, professional links, things like Gmail and employee portal. And then you have more education, learning links, student links, things that they might need to access, sort of broken down into different sections as well. And parent links that hopefully will be helpful to parents, whether it's accessing information about their child or community links, something like that. Not information about their child, but information that their child might need, like say Canvas or Future Ready PA Index, Homeless Student Services, Lunch Prepay, things like that. So that's a quick, in a nutshell, overview of the new website. Does anybody have any questions or comments?
I think the site looks great, Mr. Kern. Thanks to you and the rest of the administrators working on it and the IT team. It looks great.
I forgot to mention Eric as well. Eric's been a huge help. Sorry, I didn't mean to slight you there. also extremely helpful in getting this whole website off the ground. We've been a really good team so far. I've been really happy with the work we've been doing.
I think it looks great. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you, Mr. Fedorcha.
I do too. I'm so happy to have everything sort of all cohesive and looking so contemporary.
Thank you.
Thank you.
One thing you'll probably notice is there's kind of a lack of, well, district office has photos, but there's a lack of photos at the moment. I do want to start to add some more pictures in there, make things a little bit more colorful and a little bit more appealing to look at, as opposed to just big blobs of text for everyone to scroll through. But unfortunately, it's hard to take photos of facilities and of student happenings and things like that during the shutdown. So we'll look at older photos that maybe we can use. Mr. Link has shared with me his, I believe it was his Google Photos account, or I forget what it was, Apple Photos or something like that. So I can look through those, and I can also, hopefully start creating some new ones when restrictions lift and we can start getting back onto campus and adding some of that colorfulness to the website that would hopefully jazz it up a little bit.
Andy, thank you so much for all the work that you and Janet and Corey and the entire IT department put into this. I think we are now, we're almost at the finish line where we can put it through a couple, one more filter, internal filter, and then release it to the public. I think this is going to be a great asset as we move into the fall and what that may look like for our students and their families, and for sharing out information in a very organized manner that's also easy to navigate. So thank you for all your hard work on that. I would like to make one last comment. I'm extremely impressed by your book collection behind you. Well done, sir.
Those are DVDs and Blu-rays. I would like to pretend that I read, but I don't. I just watch the movies. So thank you for noticing, though. I appreciate it.
Either way, you're taking in information. Nice work.
Well, I teach video production, so I've got to do research somehow.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Andy, this is Gary. Excellent job. Thank you so much. It really is. You all have done a great job to really improve the setting. I mean, we always had a good site, but now we really have a great site.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this. The nice part is we also have the mobile version as well, which I obviously can't show you on a laptop screen,
Sure.
but that's going to be really neat too. It readjusts some things and reformats some things for mobile devices, but that'll be a really nice feature as well. It just creates one additional headache where once you get a page looking the way you like it, you check it on mobile and things are all over the place. So but it's going to be a really nice feature, and hopefully adds a lot more accessibility for the users. And my main goal is to make sure that information is easier to find, and hopefully by putting everything under one umbrella, that will be easier for our users. And while we have that month in July to August, hopefully we get a lot of good feedback. And if there's any issues with, I can't seem to find this, or it's not clear where the link to get to this is, please let me know during that time so that we can maybe readjust a few things and reword some things so it makes sense for people to find exactly what they need as quickly as they need.
Okay. Thank you, Andy. Mr. Hill, is there anything else you would like to add about the website this evening?
Yeah, there's a couple more things. First of all, yeah, I do want to thank Andy. They're doing a fantastic job. This is, believe me, this is not a small task. There's a lot of work behind the scenes, and the team has really done a great job, especially over the last month. Even there was things Andy was adding in there I didn't even notice because they were hidden deep. But he did a lot of work with all the other work going on. It really was really fantastic to see what he's done behind the scenes here. But I also wanted to add too, one of the other great features of the website is we talked about the community outreach back when we were in the ed policy meeting when the principals were going through their student manuals. And one of the things that we did is we changed the community outreach system. We're going to be changing that as well. And Mr. Stephen Haas has been working behind the scenes with myself and with Blackboard, and we are implementing a new system there. And the great thing about that is that's going to work directly with this new website. So when we send out an alert, it can actually pop up directly on the website without having to get Andy up out of bed at 4 o'clock in the morning. I'm sure he'll appreciate that. And these alerts will come right up on the website. So there's going to be a lot more information being shared a lot easily. So I think once we see the entire thing complete and in action, it'll be really nice to see. So I appreciate everybody's work on that. And again, a lot of hard work behind the scenes, and everybody's done a great job so far.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Martineau, anything else that you would like to bring up on that topic?
No, I just wanted to add I was happy to hear about the mobile app conjunction with the website. I'm looking forward to being able to see that. And thank you, everybody. It all really sounds great, looks great.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Mr. Curran, if you can stop sharing your screen, I'm going to share another window in a little bit.
No problem.
Thank you very much. Okay, over the past week to two, the local school districts under the umbrella of the CLIU have worked to put together a survey to send out to parents and guardians related to the fall semester. And really what we're looking to do is to have an additional kind of information source, information stream back into the district. You know, currently we're getting a lot of our information as far as safety and precautions from the Department of Education, the Governor's Office, the Department of Health, and the CDC. We're now at the point where we're looking to gather information from parents and guardians directly. And we're looking to do it in a way kind of like a similar framework across the local districts, but with the ability to individualize it to our own district. So I'm going to share with you now the first look at a survey that's going to go out, hopefully to our community tomorrow afternoon. I have some final edits to make. But I would like this group to kind of get a first look at it and know that this survey is going out. And we're going to leave it up there. We don't have a date that we're going to take it down off the website, but we are going to leave it up there for a while to give everybody ample time to respond to it. And I will receive updates on responses every Wednesday afternoon and every Friday afternoon. I will have an email sent to me with all the responses within those timeframes. So this will go out through our community service or our community outreach system tomorrow afternoon with an email from me and then a link to access the website, the survey directly, or they can go to our district website and access the survey. So that being said, I will share my screen again. So can everybody see that? Okay. So you'll see that this is an electronic survey where they can just click on the link and it's going to have that introductory statement there. Kind of saying, we're recognizing that there could be a need for a plan for providing a physical school environment with some social distancing restrictions, a blended learning model where students could be in a physical school structure with restrictions and participating in an online learning environment. So in other words, in the building some of the time, out of the building some of the time, or a full online learning environment from home, which is what we're currently doing. We're, of course, in the planning stages as we continue to review evolving medical advice and recommendations for social distancing. And we can't yet guarantee what the fall is going to look like, but we continue to plan daily to meet the needs of whatever environment we're in at that time. And then it gives a little bit of advice about what to do if you have more than one child enrolled in the school district, basically to complete a survey for each child. So I'm not going to read everything on this for you, but really what we're looking at is, which building is your child enrolled in? What grade are they in? If in the fall continue to have some safety restrictions required, which option would you choose for your child? In other words, parents, if it was your choice, what do you most want to see happen? So plan A, plan B, plan C, or plan D. Plan D being instead of our current online continuing continuity of education plan, would they prefer to enroll their son or daughter in our district digital academy, which we call Bulldog Academy here? As far as social distancing relating to school busing, we're asking parents if they can provide transportation daily, if they can do that to school, from school, both to and from school, or no, they cannot do that. So their child would have to go on a bus. Do you need a hotspot? We're using the Khajiit devices here. Do they need one in the fall? We've really closed that connectivity gap here in our district. Thank you to the work of our IT department, through some state level funding and from a generous donation from our education foundation for us to be able to purchase Khajiits for our families that need them. What are you struggling with most regarding your child's experience with online learning? What is your child struggling with most regarding online learning? So as a parent, what are you struggling with? And then what do you perceive your son or daughter to be struggling with? How do you rate the daily amount of work? Some additional open text responses there. We are also considering some disease prevention measures. Please indicate your agreement with each option by checking the boxes below. Everything from temperature checks to hand washing to wearing a face mask to eating meals in class or in classrooms instead of the cafeteria. Some other options there as well. We were looking to gain some feedback on communication. Do they feel from the district office? Is it too much, too little, or just right? Same thing from the building principals, and then same thing from their child's teacher. And then lastly, we're asking, since the closure, has your child had any mental health concerns? And then there's some additional space at the bottom for them to drill into that a little bit more and provide some additional feedback on really anything that they're thinking. So our hope, well, not our hope, but we're going to have this posted later in the day tomorrow, but we wanted to share it out with this committee first. I can't say enough about the support and help of the CLIU in the leadership of Dr. Ibe with kind of putting all of our concerns together, coming up with a template to share with us, and then for us to be able to individualize for our own districts. The work that they put into this has been extremely helpful to the local districts, including us here in Northern Lehigh. So that being said, we'll kind of open it up for comments on this.
Mr. Link, this is Mrs. Martineau.
Yes.
So I'm sorry, Mr. Fedorcha.
No, please go first. Yes.
I don't know if I missed it or what is the timeline for both disseminating this to the public and compiling results?
Sure. So our hope is to release this survey later in the day tomorrow afternoon, as well as the survey is going to be left on the website for an undetermined amount of time. At this point, we have not selected a date to deactivate it. And then every Wednesday and Friday at the end of the day, I will get an email with all the updated responses, which we will then share out at our administrative meetings to kind of go through and use that as information to make decisions moving forward into the fall.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Matt, Gary.
Yes.
My question is the phrasing of the part that says, "Do you need the external?" My mind just went blank on what I was saying, but anyway, the internet,
the hotspots,
right? My question is, by framing it that way, does that lead us to other people who may not really need it to say, "Yeah, I want one"? I mean, can that be rephrased a little differently, maybe or how are we gonna monitor it? I'm just concerned that kind of says, well, I'll take one.
So I think what we would do there, Mr. Fedorcha, is I'm sorry, I lost that on here.
Yeah,
we would kind of do what we did this year, and we would reach out to those families directly, and kind of ask them some deeper type of questions.
Okay.
Who is your current television provider? A cable provider. They say we don't have cable. Well, then okay, we know that we're in a greater area of need. If they do have cable and they're just not aware of it, that there are some programs being offered out there right now, then we would get them that information. Unfortunately, there's a kind of a sunset date for some of those programs being offered by the local internet providers through the cable companies. I am uncertain at this time if any of them are going to extend them into the fall, but we need to be prepared if they do not. Additionally, we continue to have families move in and out of the district. So we may have some people, we know that we're having some people that have already moved in and are moving in the next couple of weeks, where we want them to be able to respond to us as well for the first time.
Okay. That's, I mean, as long as we have some safeguards there, I think it was just when I read it at first, I thought, well, yeah, you know what? Hey, I like one. You know what I'm saying? And
sure,
I that would not be the case, but you know what? I don't know that, especially with kids.
Right.
The other thing too is I think that maybe if we do go into the need for virtual in the fall, I would think that the cable companies would also then extend it. I think if we don't, they will cancel it.
Right. I hope that they continue to be supportive in the fall if the need is still there. But if we're physically back in the buildings, who knows what they're going to do.
Right.
The other thing is, one of the questions that we would ask is, well, how have you been accessing it this year? We see that you've been completing your work. So tell us a little bit more about what has changed.
Right. Okay. I just asking that question because, it's like, anyway, I said it and that's fine. We got it covered. I'm glad to hear that. Thank you.
Can I add one thing about the internet hotspots? The internet hotspots that we order, the Khajiits, are designed for educational use. So they are limited to only one device connection at a time. So, and then they also are limited. You can't watch Netflix on it. You can't watch movies on it. It is limited to educational use, and there is a data cap. And it does have filters on it, things like that. So typically, if somebody would want to just take one home, just to provide internet to their whole family, that's they're going to be very disappointed, and I think they will return it within a couple of days. So that is one of the concerns that you have. I think that's probably why you're concerned. But they are for internet use, for educational use only, and they do have limits on it. So that's kind of one of our safeguards.
Right.
Yes.
Great.
Mr. Hill, this is Mrs. Martineau. I also, correct me if I'm wrong, but when we discussed purchasing these initially, we have access. We can see how they're being used. So if for some reason one was being abused, we would be able to see that.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So we have the ability to turn them off remotely as well. We can turn them off anytime we want. We have there's like a website that we log into, and we can see the usage and things like that. So yes, exactly.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hill. Any other questions on the parent and guardian survey?
Mr. Link, this is Gail. And yeah. You might have some notes above it, and I apologize. So let me ask this question, I guess. What if if a parent would say, I'm going to do Bulldog Academy, or I only want to do online, and we find out that, 50% of our students want online and 50% of our students want in school. Are we going to build our plan around that? Or are we, I guess I'm trying to understand what we're going to do with the survey results. Is our goal to get the students back into school, or is the goal to go do all online? And please don't say that's the case. And, but, I'm just trying to figure out what the goal is with the information we're going to get back.
Sure. So that's a good question, Gail. So I'm going to answer the first part about the goal. The goal is going to be to do whatever is we believe is safest for our students and staff. This information is only one piece of information coming in. We also have to consider any restrictions that may still be in place, any guidance coming down from the federal and state governments as well. There could be some mandates coming down from the federal and state government saying you must do this. What we're trying to gauge is everything from, if we do open the schools, are we anticipating that a lot of parents are going to be fearful to send their students back and may look to enroll them somewhere outside of our district? That will have all sort of implications for us. Are we looking to say, okay, even the transportation issue is a big issue for us. If we do reopen the schools, but there are mandated social distancing guidelines in place, or we as a district want to mandate our own guidelines, we need to know how to plan for that. So right now, in some ways, we're just trying to gauge interest from parents. And this is going to be just one slice of the information pie that we'll be using to kind of guide our opening, or I should say our teaching and learning decisions going into the fall.
Thank you. I guess I was also, to kind of piggyback on that then too, is, Wednesday, obviously, we're going to re-talk about our budget and what it is. And then next week, we're going to talk about implementing a budget. And what would the cost implication be if we, on some of these things, if we have a lot of our students choosing to go to the cyber charter schools or do our online schooling instead of coming back to our brick and mortar schools, are we in any way, shape, or form prepared for any of that? And I'm guessing this is what this survey is trying to gauge too.
So you're absolutely right. It's helping us to get information so we can make more informed decisions, everything from teaching and learning, but also to the upcoming budget. So the answer to that is yes, we're going to use it to get that type of information, but also yes, if parents make those type of decisions, the impact on the 2021 budget and probably for budget years, a few years even after that, is going to be enormous. And we need to start planning for that now.
Sure.
Mr. Lake, just to add on to what Mrs. Husak said, this is Mrs. Martineau. I see some of the questions here. I was wondering if there was a way we could use the answers to these questions to also discern which of our families, we have essential workers and workers who are going to be going back to work. If for some reason any mandates from the state do not comply with mandates for people to return to work, or do not meet up, and we have parents that have to return to work and can't teach their children from home, do we have some sort of plan to mitigate that?
There is not a prescriptive plan at this point for if we have parents that are mandated to return to work, but we are not open as a school district. So that goes for not only for parents of our students, but in some cases for our own instructors. These are the type of issues that we're trying to work through.
This is Gary. What I really like about this, and I'm assuming we'll be able to use that, is that when you look at the thing of parents not really being being afraid to send their kids back to the school and are starting to look at cyber elsewhere, it gives us a chance, I'm sure, then to reach out to them and tell them how great our cyber academy is, that they would have so much more access to school things for their children if they enrolled in that, and it's a great opportunity. I think if we use that, I think that may be a great help to our academy.
So that would be part of the plan, communication going out to those families, and we actually do that already, even kind of pre-pandemic. If we learn that a family is going to disenroll to go to an online cyber school, we also reach out to them before actually withdrawing them to have a discussion about Bulldog Academy and the benefits of that and how they would actually remain a Northern Lehigh student. So yes, we would also follow up with these type of families as well. If I could just for a second to go back to Mrs. Martineau's question as well, and I failed to mention this earlier. This is not going to be the only survey going out. We also are looking towards building surveys, for our own employees. Different types of questions, but also to solicit that information from them as well. Or I should say solicit information from them as well. So this is a starting point.
It's a good survey. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fedorcha. Are there any other questions or comments this evening on the parent and guardian survey?
I don't have any.
This is Robin. I think also that survey is going to bring out some good points, especially when that information is coming from the parents themselves. That'll be beneficial for the school district. So great job in getting that lined up.
Thank you, Mr. Disler. Okay, Mrs. Martineau, that concludes our agenda this evening. Do you have any other questions or concerns?
Do any other board members have any questions or concerns they'd like to pose?
I just have a quick question, and we may or may not have the answer to this, Mr. Link. I should have asked earlier, but just curious how the Friday backpack lunches are going to continue to keep helping with the community. I know you had said that. Thank you for sharing that Giant provided an additional donation to some of that. And I'm just curious going forward how we're going to continue with that program.
Sure. So what's going to happen is, and we actually looked into this a little bit more. Even today, I met with Mrs. Bonnick. A community outreach message will be going out on Thursday. What's going to happen is the week of June 8th, the food services department will be shutting down. We will not be distributing meals the week of June 8th. The week after that, the week of June 15th, we are then going to be distributing food on Tuesdays and Thursdays, where each distribution bag at that point will have a much larger amount of food to spread the gap in between those days throughout the week. We learned, unfortunately, that Second Harvest does not supply food for the Backpack Buddies program during the summer. They don't do it for any school districts. So what we're looking to do to see is if there's a way that we can either continue it or increase the amount of food for certain families, like on a Thursday. So that's something that we're working through right now with the money that came in from Giant Foods and the Education Foundation.
Thank you for the update, and thank you to those who donated. I hope we're continuing to send those notices out, and thank you to those supporting community members.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, Mrs. Bonnick and I actually drafted that Connect Ed message to go out, or I'm sorry, Community Outreach System message. I'm trying to learn the new label here, to go out on Thursday. I believe we set that to go out on Thursday at 3 o'clock.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there any other questions or comments? And Mr. Hill, do we have anything coming in from the community?
There are no questions or comments from the community, no.
Okay, then I move to adjourn if that's okay with you, Mr. Lang.
It is. Thank you. And again, I thank everyone's participation this evening. And for those of you that will be online Wednesday night, I look forward to seeing you then.
Great. And I just want to say thank you to everybody. And it was a great meeting. And everybody, as I always say, stay safe and stay well, everyone, please.
I am also commenting on that as well as what Gary did. Stay safe and good job for tonight's meeting.
Thanks. Have a good night.
Thanks,
everyone.
everyone.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Have a good evening.
Good night.
Good night.